So first up, we have Kevin Arnold. Kevin Arnold is an SJSU MFA graduate, and he's been the president of Poetry Center San Jose for 12 years, and he's retiring this summer. One of his short stories, excerpted from his novel Good with People, won first place at the 2009 San Francisco Book Festival. He'll be part of the faculty for the Gold Rush Writers Workshop on May 4th, 5th, and 6th. So please help me welcome Kevin Arnold.
Hi. My work is kind of halfway between fiction and poetry. I've done quite a bit of poetry, and now I've kind of concentrated on fiction. So what I thought I'd do is read the first. I wrote a novel here for my MFA thesis, and it was a novel. It was based on a narrator being a poet. And so it's got about 15 poems in it. I'm just going to read the first 2.5 poems from that and kind of tell you how they fit in and see what I'm doing. There's a good reason that not too many people write novels with a lot of poems in them, because I think readers tend to just kind of skip over them sometimes, and there's also kind of a difference. Novels are about release of tension, and I think poems are maybe different than that. But this story takes place in the Bay Area, and it's a guy from Palo Alto who meets this woman from Texas on a plane, and it's a sort of romance. And he's trying to get things going in the beginning, and she's a horsewoman and he's a poet, and so the first thing he does is reads her a poem about horses. And so that, since also we wanted to use Bay Area poets in here, this is a Jane Hirschfield poem. And so this is the kind of poem that he reads to her in order to kind of get a little closer to her and get her a little more comfortable with the idea of poetry. Jane's poem is called The Love of Aged Horses. Because I know tomorrow his faithful gelding heart will be broken, when the spotted mare is trailered away and driven, I come today to take him for a gallop up on Diaz Ridge. Returning, he will whinny for his love, ancient, spavined, her white parts red with hill dust, her red parts whitened with the same. She never answers. But today, when I turn him loose at the hill gate with the taste of chewed oat on his tongue and the saddle sweat rinsed off with water, I know he will canter, however tired, winning wildly up the ridge's near side, and I know he will find her. He will be filled with the sureness of horses, whose bellies are grain-filled, whose long-ribbed loneliness can be scratched into no longer lonely. His long teeth on her withers, her rough-coated spots will grow damp and wild. Her long teeth on his withers, his oiled cheek with smoothness will grow damp and wild. Their shadows chiasmus will fleck and fill with flies. The 8 marks of their fortunes stamp them with and then cancel the earth. From ear flick to tail switch, they stand in one body. No luck as boundless as theirs. Well, she kind of likes the poem, and so she wants him to read one of his own poems. So after they've met maybe 2 or 3 times, he finally reads her one of his poems, which is one of my poems, called Invitation to the Opera. They say to handle each paper once, but I can never do that with opera invites, for I am someone who would like to like opera. So when one comes, along with the bills, fundraising letters for my daughter's pricey college, small magazines that published my work, magazines I keep renewing but never find time to read, even gold-embossed credit card offerings to my ex-wife, it's the opera offer I can't throw away. It would be so good if I could get my daughter to go. I wonder whether to subscribe or just pick 1 or 2. Perhaps start with a familiar name, La Traviata, Madame Butterfly, Aida, or Carmen. Or how about these colorful ads for strange titles, The Death of Klinghoffer or Nixon in China. Any program that puts the stars and tails in flowing gowns, some Wednesday, Friday, or Saturday, maybe next year, I'll be there, part of the daringly dressed audience as the lights dim. Imagine me in that heart-stopping quiet right before songs echo into the night. Well, she doesn't mind that poem either, so that kind of keep going. And so he drags her off to a poetry reading, and that's the last poem I'm going to read. And it's actually the fragments of a poem, and then I'm going to read a page of prose that goes along with it, which gives you an idea of how I'm trying to integrate poetry and fiction. And so the first line of this is fiction, and then we go into 3 stanzas of his poem, and then kind of go back and forth a little bit. I think you'll be able to tell the difference. Jim, the big guy in his tie-dyed bandana, played a kazoo before he started the poem. This is his poem, Teddy Bear. This is by Jim Standish, who's now passed away. He was a friend of mine. What do you do when you can't have her anymore, but she makes you a teddy bear with a pretty vest and a tiny book about artists for it to read when you're not home, and a headband like you wear, and a little button heart so you'll always have love? If only she hadn't said that. I took it home, opened the seams between its legs. Diana gasped. Jim's voice got louder as he went on. Oh my God, its poor flat head with its silly sad mouth and its shiny black eyes bobbing helplessly back and forth, up and down, its cotton insides getting all torn up and jammed up its neck. Donna's face was taut. That's just dreadful. Shh, it takes courage to read a poem like that. Let him finish at least. Jim modulated his voice down for the poem's ending. It's starting to stink. When it gets too bad, I'll leave it outside her kitchen door, hanging by its little headband. While a handful sat mute, most of the audience clapped. Diana wrinkled her brow and kept moving in her seat. She leaned over. That was awful, sick. Can't you just think of it as a satire on loneliness? She shook her head. It's perversion, plain and simple. I can't believe nobody walked out. Look around, lots of hands clapping. She stood and put her hands on her hips, her head still shaking. I'm sorry, but I think it's time for me to go home. I stared up at her, pleading with my eyes, but I'm reading after the break. In Dallas, we hang guys for less than that. She tried to laugh. Now that is perverse. I certainly don't belong here, Wade. You just have just enough time to take me to my car. When I hesitated, she said, if you can't give me a ride, I'll have to walk. She passed in front of me. I followed her, head down. People rearranged their knees so we could get by them. When we got to the door, I didn't turn around, but I knew people were staring. A disaster. We didn't say a word as we got into my car and drove toward hers. At the cafe parking lot, she hopped out of my car without a word and climbed up into her SUV. I walked to her window. She lowered it and said, thanks for inviting me, I guess. I wish it had worked out differently. She started her engine and drove off. I took deep breaths of the surprisingly cool air as I watched her taillights brighten at the stop sign and dim, then finally disappear before I drove back to the Friends meeting hall. Goodbye, Diana, I whispered into the night.